Chairman, I've had confirmation that the live stream has started.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, the meeting will be adjourned so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, the Chairman will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, the Chairman will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. As members are called to speak, the Chairman will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic officer will advise you. The vote for today's meeting will be taken by roll call and the result announced by the Democratic Services Officer. Members must be present for the duration of the discussion on the application in order to be able to vote. We have public representation at the meeting today and they will be joining the meeting by telephone. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm, the procedure for today's meeting is that members of the committee who wish to speak on an item should indicate by putting an X in the chat box. Before we start today's business, I will ask the committee members to confirm they are present and state their electoral division member. I will now call your name. Please can you confirm your name and electoral division member? Councillor Foote.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Jesse Foote, Cornwall Councillor for the St. Germans and Landulph Division.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Good afternoon. My name's Malcolm Brown, Councillor for St. Austell, Bethel.
Thank you. And Councillor Evans.
I'm Geoffrey Evans, Cornwall Councillor for Falmouth, Arwennick.
Thank you. I can confirm that the following officers are also present. Mark Andrews, Legal Services, Elizabeth Francis, Licensing, Julie Flower, Licensing, myself, Emma Code, Democratic Officer, and meeting producer today is Rowena Brebner. The first item on today's agenda is election of chairman. Please could I have nominations for the election of chairman?
I would be pleased to nominate Councillor Foote.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, can I have a vote in favour, please? Councillor Evans? Thank you.
4.
Councillor Brown?
4.
Councillor Foote?
4.
Thank you very much. I can confirm that Councillor Foote will chair today's meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I have no apologies.
Do we have any declaration of interests for any item on the agenda today, please? I'll take that silence as a no. Right, so we are here to look at 2 different applications. So the first thing that I'd like to say that anybody who's joining us by telephone, we are looking at the application for Roseveth, Little Roseveth first, and then we'll be looking at the Bowgie Inn following that. So if you're here for the Bowgie, it might be sometime before we get to that application. So I would ask that you would leave the call and watch the live stream and tune back in when we get to the Bowgie Inn application. But the first application we'll be looking at is the Little Roseveth application. And what I'd like to do is just to explain how the process will work for everybody who's listening in. And I'd like to first reassure you that the members are familiar with the applications before us. We've read through the representations, we've read through the various bits and pieces that have been sent through to us, quite a significant amount. So we are familiar with the key issues here. So what will happen first is so I'm explaining the procedures to you, that's what I'm doing first. But first we'll hear from the licensing department, from the licensing service, who will outline the matter for us. and they'll mention any conditions that have been suggested or agreed to at that point. Then the members of the committee will have the opportunity to ask questions of the licensing service if we have any. Then following that, we'll hear from the applicants who will present their application and call any witnesses. We'll then have an opportunity for the members to ask any questions of the applicant or their representative or their witnesses. Then we'll have any representations from responsible authorities from within the council in relation to the application. There haven't been any. There was representation from the police on the little Roseveth one. However, they have withdrawn the representation based on additional conditions. We then will hear from any other external responsible authorities, which there aren't any, but then we'll have representations from other persons. So that's when we'll hear from people who have sent in their representations on this application. Members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of anybody who's made a representation, any other persons. We'll then have an opportunity for the chairman and the members to ask any questions of all or any of the parties who are on the call, and then the applicant will have the final submission. Following that, the subcommittee might seek any clarification on any points raised in that final submission. We will then withdraw from the call to seek legal advice, and then actually everybody will leave the call. We will seek legal advice, we will come up with a proposal, and then we'll come back onto the live stream where we'll discuss and vote on that proposal, and that will be the decision. So what I would ask is that people, once you've left the call, that you just tune into the live stream and you'll hear the decision there. Otherwise, our officers will be in touch with you with that decision. There have been quite a few representations on both applications today. So I would just ask that people who have sent in their representations to try not to repeat things. We do have, multiple objections, multiple representations, but I would ask that you try not to repeat something that's already been raised by somebody else. Are there any questions from anybody on how that procedure will work? Now, everybody will get their chance to say what they need to say. I do ask that there wouldn't be any cross-examination, that any questions would come through the chair, and we will be listening. So are there any questions on how the process is going to work? Check to make sure your mics are not on mute, and if you're all happy, then we will continue. We're looking at item 4.1 on the agenda, which is the application for the grant of a premises license for Little Roseveth in Tregavethen, Truro. So if I could ask the licensing officers to outline this application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. An application has been received from Mr. and Mrs. Parker for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Little Roseveth, Tregavethen, Truro. As you will see in the report on pages 3 to 5, the grant application is for the provision of recorded music and the supply of alcohol, with opening hours Monday to Sunday, 10 AM to 12:30 AM. The location, map and plan can be found at Appendix 1, pages 10 and 11 of the report pack. There has been one responsible authority representation from Devon and Cornwall Police, which has been agreed, detailed on pages 5 and 6 and Appendix 2 of the report pack. If the committee is minded to grant the licence is to be issued in accordance with the amendments which have been agreed. There have been 7 representations from other persons. These are detailed in Appendix 3, pages 14 to 40 of the report pack. As a result of the representations received from other persons, the applicant has provided a written submission and one response to the first received representation. This can be found in supplementary agenda pack, pages 1 to 16. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Liz. That's really helpful. So, do members have any questions for the licensing officer? Make sure you're not on mute.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. No.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. All right, I'll take that as we have no questions. So we'll now hear from the applicant. So do we have Mr. and Mrs. Parker both on the line, or is it just one of you? Just make sure that you're not on mute, and if you could speak up now, that would be brilliant.
Can you hear me?
Chairman, I have had to mute a couple of them for background noise. So if anyone needs to unmute, it's *6 to press on their telephones to unmute, *6.
Thank you. I was hearing somebody there.
That was me, Mr. Andrew Parker.
Excellent. Mr. Parker, if you could outline the application for us, please, that would be really helpful.
Yes, I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to speak. This application is made in support an enterprise that will complement the holiday cottage business on the farm. I and my wife have lived at Little Rosebeth since 1997. I was born in Cornwall and only left the county for my education, returning as soon as I could in '84. 5 years ago, we were faced with a dilemma at Little Rosebeth. There were 3 barns on property which were reaching a state of repair that would require substantial investment to maintain them. We were faced with 3 options: demolition, repair, or conversion to holiday cottages. The farm is not big enough to run an agricultural business that would sustain a large family, so the latter option was one we chose, since option 2 would have cost large sums of money with no return, and option 1 would spoil the original farm layout. A year ago, last September, my eldest daughter was married. The wedding reception was held at Little Rosebeth, where there were in total 150 guests. My wife and I, after discussion, felt that holding weddings would complement the holiday cottage business. We looked at the requirements of the law to ensure that we did not do anything wrong. In order for the alcohol to be consumed on the premises, we discovered that one of us needed a personal license and that we would need a premises license. These requirements are in place for the 4 principles of license holder and premises hold license: prevention of crime and disorder, prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the protection of children. I would like the committee to understand that we take these duties very seriously. The application requests a license for every day of the week. The only reason that this application was made is because we have no idea in advance what day of the week married couples would require a reception. I have researched wedding venues throughout the country. All the marquee event premises, bar a few, are close to residential properties, are in the countryside, and a large number are near public footpaths. We have annually held a charity event which does not require the erection of a wedding marquee. This event has raised £800 to £900 for charity. We have considered holding a couple of other events for fundraising for charity. We understand the concerns of the local community and consider them carefully in making this application. I have answered the representations and submitted them to the committee. If I have missed any points, I will be happy to answer them now. It is worth noting that the police have visited the premises and have no concerns. They have made amendments to the license conditions, which we fully agree with. I have had a visit from one other person who is an immediate neighbour who is the closest to my premises. We had a long discussion in which I explained our proposal and the management of any events, and he was happy with my explanation. In the current circumstances, COVID-19 and Brexit, I am sure the government looks favourably on businesses generating income. They would also want to ensure there is no large impact on local communities. I hope that I have demonstrated to the committee in my answer to the representation that this is the case. I can understand the concerns that the neighbours have when they saw the application request 7 days a week, 365 days a year. To allay the fears of the neighbouring properties, we would be happy for the committee to restrict the licence to 7 wedding events a year and for 4 non-marquee events a year. The latter would allow me to continue to hold charity fundraising events. Once again, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. That's really helpful. Do members have any questions for the applicant, please?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I just have a couple of quick ones. Something you just mentioned there. So how many years have you been running the holiday business there?
The holiday business has been going for approximately 5 years. We converted one cottage about 5 years ago, and the other 2 were done the following year.
Right.
Two two-bedroom properties and one one-bedroom property, and they effectively have taken the place of barns that were actually falling down and looking particularly nice and in a bad state of repair.
Okay. How many guests can you hold there at the moment? How many rooms and so forth do you have?
we have also attached to the house a bed and breakfast annex, if you like, so that we could accommodate 4 people there. In the holiday cottages, we could, in total, accommodate 14 people.
Okay. So in all the 5 years that you've been running the business there, have you ever had any complaints from neighbors, concerns about traffic or noise or anything like that at all?
No, I haven't had one complaint, and I think you may have seen in one of the representations that we're regarded as good neighbours, and we do our best to fit into the local community. We also had my daughter's wedding here a year ago, last September, where we had 150 guests, and we had no complaints, no mention at all that there was loud music or there was a problem particularly with it.
Thanks for expanding on that. I was going to ask you about that wedding. I see you've got a question from Councillor Brown.
Yes, sorry for not coming in earlier. Could I just ask first of all, Mr. Parker, I did read that you were in the paperwork that you were suggesting a maximum of 7 or 9 events a year and 3 charity events. You're now saying 4 other events. Was what you were saying in your presentation indicating that you would accept that as a condition on the license if it was granted?
Yes, we're quite happy to accept that condition, because this isn't an application to change of use of the premises at all. We would be working on the 28-day rule as far as marketing were concerned. And if you consider that a wedding would require, and this is from the experience we had with my daughter, that we would have to have the marquee up for a total of 4 days per wedding at a minimum, and some of them may require 5 days. Then for the 28-day rule, 7 4s are 28. So 7 weddings would be the maximum. To be honest with you, at my age and where I'm in my life, I don't particularly want to do any more than that. I just wanted it to be as a complement to the holiday cottage business.
No, that's a very fair answer. Thank you very much. How would you be trying to market the business? And I suppose what I'm thinking behind that is that probably weddings have different types of characteristics, and how would you be trying to ensure that the type of wedding and the type of guests would be one that would fit in to the rural locality that you've got?
Well, we would not be using any form of marketing at all. It would basically be word of mouth, and we would vet very carefully people who applied for the wedding. We have the person who did the catering for my daughter's wedding was actually suggested it because he has a catering business which he would want to, because all we would do is provide the venue and the marquee and the contents of the marquee. We wouldn't do any decoration or any of the catering at all. He would do it, and basically he would be the one who would do the marketing, and so there would be 2 forms of vetting, one from him, and we made it quite plain that the type of wedding that we want to have is not one where it's like a rave or anything like that at all. We want a normal celebration of somebody marrying.
Thank you very much. I think the last question I've got is that could you tell us a bit about the use of the lane running past the property? Because some of the people raising concerns about your proposal are obviously worried about the possible conflict with horses and other types of users. I was just wondering if you could give us an idea how busy at the present time the lane is, and what the mix perhaps of different types of users is.
Yes, okay. Well, we're very fortunate in many respects because we live in the Craigavon Valley, which the road that goes past the end of our property effectively goes to nowhere other than to other houses within the valley. And I don't know whether you're aware or know of the Tregetham Valley, but there are a couple of roads which are what we call rat runs that basically have mainly people going to the hospital at Trelith use those roads. And one of those roads is from Short Lane's End down to Warder and then over the valley and back into the back of the hospital. And that one completely misses us. We also have one at the top of my farm, which runs from a turn-off just down from Chai Booker, heading again to meet up with the same road that meets with the one coming from Short Lane's End. So there is no point in coming down our road. So the usage of the road is very, very low. And we only have, I mean, I haven't stood at the end of the road and counted the cars, but, you know, on probably 5, 6 cars a day go down through there at the most. And in the evening, hardly any at all. Basically, as far as I can see, there isn't any particular issue with respect to traffic along that road.
Sorry, one supplementary question on that. What about horse riders? Clearly concerns have been expressed by people representing riders, but how common is it to see horses being ridden down the lane?
Well, the last horse that came down through the lane here, because I don't know whether you've looked on the map to see where the bridle path runs, but it runs through my yard up through my field. Originally, this was effectively a pathway that came down from a house that was on the property for the workmen, and above that house leads into a field, which was never a public footpath at all, but it was signed as a public footpath, and in fact the previous owners of this property applied for the bridle path to be closed because A, it wasn't one, and B, the top part of it wasn't originally in the bridle path. It was only put on there to get through. So what happens with that is that they had an application which was agreed by everybody locally, including the council, etc. And there was one objection which came from the Horse Society, which remained open. And the last horse that I remember coming through here, occasionally you have the hunt come down, which they send a notification, but that's usually on a Saturday during the day or on a Tuesday. And the last one that went through, that I remember, unfortunately the girl was bucked off in the field and broke her arm, and there was I had no cattle in the field at the time. There was no noise in the field. I don't know what spooked the horse, but it certainly wasn't a wedding that did it. As far as any problems with someone coming down the bridle path, I am actually a veterinary surgeon myself, and I would anticipate the wedding is going to run from 12 o'clock through till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And if you had a horse coming down the lane, the noise is not suddenly going to come out and hit the horse. The horse is going to hear the noise from a distance, and so therefore will show any form of agitation as it approaches the noise, as it gets louder. And at that point, if it did, and most horses are quite happy with that kind of thing, they don't have an issue. So if the person approaching on the horse sees agitation, the logical thing would be to turn around and take a route which is exactly the same, but through the valley and up the road and around the other side, and it's just as quiet as going through the bridle path. Also, you know, as far as the bridle path is concerned, and the guests at the wedding, then A, you would have to have a horse coming down there, is the first thing, and the second thing is that you know, the people are not on the bridle path for the wedding. They have to cross the bridle path to get to the toilets, but they're not going to be going to the toilets all evening. That's going to be on an occasional basis. Most horses have no issues with people walking across the road in front of them or near them. to say in the representations that everybody's going to be inebriated would mean that I fail to follow the principles of the license by ensuring that people do not become intoxicated, and that is certainly a part of the license holders thing that I take very seriously.
So, sorry, just to be absolutely clear, other than when the hunt is passing, you're saying that there are in practice very few horse riders using the lane normally at the present time. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your answers to my questions.
The other thing, just to clarify, is that it sounded from my answer that a hunt might be here on a regular basis. Well, they don't. They actually come approximately once a year, maybe at the outside twice a year. And prior to coming, they always send a notification through the post. So if there was a wedding on at that time, I can actually refuse them coming onto my land. I can't refuse them coming down the bridle path, but I would actually just contact them and say, on this particular occasion, would it be, okay for you not to use that bridle path? Even when they're hunting around here, they do rarely come down. I think I've had them in the 20 years I've been here, maybe twice down through the bridle path.
Okay, thank you for the questions, Councillor Brown. Thank you for your answers, Mr. Parker. I was interested in how well used the bridleway was as well. Now, you mentioned alternate bridleways, and we don't want to be blocking this section of bridleway at all. Of course, we want to take into consideration the horses and anybody else that might be using that. But just out of interest, you mentioned an alternate path. How far away is that from this current bridleway?
Well, firstly, I want to make it quite plain that we have absolutely no intention of blocking it. People are perfectly entitled to use it in the same way as the people who are attending the wedding are entitled to use a bridle path. If you're attending a wedding, it doesn't exclude you from using it. And certainly if the wedding is going on, there will be no blockage of that bridle path. It'll be open all the time. So that's the first thing. It's only if a horse showed signs, and that people walking would make no difference. They would still continue to come. It would only be if a horse showed signs of being agitated as a result of coming closer to music as it got louder and louder. So I don't know whether you have a map, but if you're facing down the driveway, instead of coming down the driveway, you turn right, you could take the road around and meet the bridle path at the top of my property, and it would extend your ride by approximately a quarter of a mile, maybe a bit more.
Okay. That's helpful. No, I'm not looking at a map at the moment, but I've taken a close look at quite a few different maps and zoomed in on things from various directions. So that's really helpful. So do members have any other questions for the applicant at this point in time? Okay. So, Mr. Parker, we're going to move on to representations from responsible authorities. I'm hoping that we have Sue Edwards here on the line with us. But
sorry, Chairman, it's Mark Andrews from Legal.
Yeah.
I did put an X in the...
oh, sorry, I missed you. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, Mark.
Fine. So, yeah, just to clarify, it's Mark Andrews from Legal Services. I'm the solicitor advising the committee. I've just got a point of clarification, really, because I think it's important in the context of the application. But if I could just ask the applicant just to confirm, so the condition that he's suggesting is 7 weddings per year, but then he said, I think you said, sorry if I'm incorrect, but you said 4 marquee events per year. So is that in addition to the 7? So it'll be a total of 11 events, but there'll be 7 weddings and then 4 other events so that you can do the charity events. Is that correct? Thank you.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah. No, we would be quite happily with a restriction of 7 events with the marquee a year. The only reason I added the additional ones, they would be without the use of the marquee, or basically just be. I've got a pizza oven there, which we effectively have with the Rotary Club, local Rotary Club. We have a pizza evening, and we invite people and charge for entry and we will usually raise between £800 and £900 a year, which goes to charity, and we contribute everything, to that.
Can you tell me how long have you been? So, Mark, thank you for that clarification. I think that's really important. But Mr. Parker, can you just tell me a bit more about those charity events? How long you've been running them? Have you ever had any issues with the bridal way or neighbors during any of those events?
I've had no issues whatsoever, no complaints, and no issues with the bridal way during those events. And basically, I've been doing them annually, probably for about 6 or 7 years, something like that. I can't remember exactly. I could look up it. I could ask the Rotary Club to let us know. I'm a member of Turbos Down, and we try and raise money for charities locally.
Ever had any complaints from neighbors for those events?
No, not for those, or not for my daughter's wedding at all. I haven't received one complaint at all.
Okay, and do you have kind of significant numbers for those events? When if you're
the wedding had 150 guests, and the other events usually we have 50, 60 people.
Okay. There's been some concern raised about provision for parking for people. Can you tell me what the parking's like on site?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I can't really understand where that comes from, because basically my farmyard is opposite the Peterborough urban area, and last year when my daughter had a wedding, she had 150 guests, and we parked all the cars in the farmyard area, because it's a large open area, flat area that we can fit the number of cars that would attend the wedding. We didn't have one person park in the lane or on the road coming into the property at all. Nobody parked outside of my property.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Right, so do members have any other questions on anything that's just been discussed? If not, we're going to move on, hopefully to Sue Evers if she's on the line. But Mr. Parker, you're going to be listening pretty much now until we get towards the end of hearing from other people making representations. What I would ask is that you just write down any comments, any questions that, anything that comes up during the next few minutes that you want to address in your final submission. Do scribble that down, and we'll listen to you. You get the final right of reply. So I would just ask that you kind of write things down if they come up that you wish to address, and we'll come back to you towards the end of this part of the hearing, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have Sue Edwards on the line?
Yes, sir.
Oh, excellent. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, I just thought that even though I've made an agreement, I have visited the Parkers, I have looked at the land, and I just thought I may assist if you had any questions. I know there was some criticism in some of the representations that I hadn't commented on the fact that there was a footpath or a bridle way, but to be perfectly honest, it's not something I would even think of looking for in an application. It's not something I've ever looked at before, so I wouldn't feel qualified in any way whatsoever to make a comment on that.
That's absolutely fine. I wonder if members have any questions for Sue at all?
Chairman, sorry to interrupt again. It's Mark Andrews from Legal. Can we just clarify who Sue Edwards is, please?
Oh, sorry. Sue is from the police department, rather. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So from Devon and Cornwall Police.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, and the police will be one of our responsible authorities who we consult with on every application. And Sue, the police would have come to an agreement with the applicant to add additional conditions to make the application more robust in adhering and not undermining the 4 licensing objectives. So Sue, I'm conscious that, quite a few people said, can you make sure that the police know that there's a bridle way? It's not really something that falls under the Licensing Act as such. I suppose an argument could be made that there would be an element of public nuisance there, but it really is the responsibility of the applicant to make sure that people are behaving themselves and that the bridle way is free of any obstructions, and there is no public nuisance or danger to public safety or protecting children and so forth.
Just for any members of the public that are listening, my thing that I look at is the prevention of crime and disorder. And I wouldn't feel that I would suggest that maybe anything to do with public nuisance and footways, etc., is more for perhaps environmental health. I don't know, but I look at, is this application going to cause crime and disorder? And, you know, hand on heart, you know, some weddings a year, bearing in mind that the Parkers had their daughter's wedding there. I can't say that any event like that is causing crime and disorder. I have numerous amounts of wedding venues in my area, and I could probably count on one hand the amount of times the police have been called to them.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Do members have any other questions for Sue? Otherwise, we're going to move on here.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
I'm wondering, Councillor Foote, if you can see the chat box properly, given...
Oh, I can. Sorry, I'm being distracted. Yeah. I've got two computers in front of me and a lap full of paperwork. So sorry.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to ask Sue if she has any comments on the extra condition limiting the number of events a year, which has been put forward by the applicant.
To be perfectly honest, and I'm sure Mr. Parker would support me in this, it was something we discussed when I went to meet with them. You know, I did say about limiting the number of the of events a year, and to my confession, I didn't include that in my representation, so I would be fully supportive of limiting the amount of numbers. You may wish to consider a condition that's quite standard, which says that notice would be given to the licensing authority of the events, just so you can keep a tally on the amount of the number of events that are held in a year. Then there can be no dispute as to whether he's, you know, there's already been 4 or 7 or whatever in a 12-month period.
Yeah. Could I thank you for that reply, which I think is extremely helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to be keeping a better eye on the chat box now, Malcolm. Thank you, Councillor Brown. So, okay, if we have no further questions for Sue, we're going to move on to representations from other persons. So the first person I have on my list is Mr. John Foote. Are you on the line, Mr. Foote? You might have to press *6 to take yourself off mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
If that's Mr. Foote, I can hear you.
It is. This is John Foote. Hello.
Hello. So if you'd like to just tell us about your representations and your concerns here, please.
Well, if you read my representations, then I'm comfortable with what I said. Listening to the discussion so far, the bit that I'm uncomfortable with is a number of references have been made to the wedding that took place a couple of years ago, and the fact there were no complaints. It was the Parker's own family. There's no way that I would seek to complain about an event that I thought was going to be a one event for a family. And I think the other important thing to consider is that obviously probably all of the guests, if not substantially most of them, would have been known to the Parkers, and therefore I think, you know, the behaviour of their attendees would be measured accordingly. So I think that's an important consideration. I think that I certainly wouldn't complain about a wedding, even if the noise and disturbance affected us. In fact, I think that we weren't actually here the weekend that it took place, so I can't actually comment from memory on the noise. I think that is probably it that I would want to add to the representation I've made. Do you need me to talk about anything that's in my representation?
I certainly don't. I don't, you know, so unless there was some new information or there's anything that came up on what you've heard so far in the hearing this morning that you wanted to address, which you've just done, I think it's a good point. Yeah, it's a family wedding, absolutely. Being away the weekend might have something to do with it as well, but I think those are valid points. I don't need you to add anything additional to what you put in your representation.
Okay.
Do Councillor Brown or Councillor Evans have any questions for Mr. Foote here? I'll take that as a no. I don't see any fresh X's in my box either. Can I ask you then, Mr. Foote, so there's some of the other events that have taken place there, charity events, you know, the operation of the business there, have you ever had any issues, noise or issues with the bridal way or or anything come up that's been of concern to you in the running of that business?
No, and nor would I have expected to. I think the music that's played when they hold the charity events is certainly of a low volume in nature, and we can hear it, but it doesn't cause us unnecessary disturbance. And the holiday cottages are holiday cottages. I think it's neither an issue for us.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, if members don't have any other questions for Mr. Foote on his representations, and Mrs. Foote was in there as well, then we'll move on. I don't see any questions popping up.
Okay, thank you. I've got two other small points, if I may.
Yes, of course, please.
One is when Mr. Parker was talking about or summarising the activity for the weddings, he talked about it going on to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And of course, the application is for different hours than to that. So I think that wasn't entirely accurate. And the other was, he also talked about his nearest neighbour being happy with the arrangements. And I don't know if there are other representations could be made by other parties, but obviously his nearest neighbour has made a representation about this. So I hope he'll have the opportunity to speak. But if not, I don't think that well, certainly to my understanding, they're not happy.
Yes. So how many meters away is your property from the application site?
I couldn't tell you, a few hundred, but we face each other across a valley. So right. It's certainly the case that we've been able to call to one another across the valley and be heard with our own voice.
Okay. Well, certainly we've had other representations, which you'll see in the pack as well. But if that's all you'd like to say, Mr. Foote, it's much appreciated.
It is, thank you.
Taking your time out to be here with us today, as well as making.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
So, okay, thank you. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to the next person on my list. I've got Mr. Martin Wright and Mr. Mark Weir. Are either of you on the line, please? You might have to press *6 to take your microphone off of mute. So Mr. Wright or Mr. Weir? Okay, I don't see Mr. Wright or Mr. Weir. Just so you know, we have read through all of the representations. Mr. Wright and Mr. Weir did make a representation, but as was mentioned by the applicant, they said that they've also been good neighbors. So saying that the application site have been good neighbors for a number of years as well. So okay, so I have we have other representations from other people. We have one from Robert Fraser, who's from the Ramblers. We have a couple from the BHS, Gina Harvey, Lucy Wilson. We also have representation from Dave and Jenny Thomas, and then also from Carol Rouse. Now, I have everybody on this list, but I don't have confirmation about whether or not any of those people wish to speak. I'll go through that list again, and if you're on the line and wish to speak, please do so. So is Robert Fraser on the line from Cornwall Ramblers?
Okay, Chairman, can I just clarify again that if anyone does wish to speak, they need to press *6 to unmute their telephone. Thank you.
Thanks, Rowena. So Robert Fraser. Okay. Do we have Gina Harvey on the line? Okay. Do we have Lucy Wilson on the line? Do we have David and Jenny Thomas on the line? Again, you might have to press *6 to take yourself off mute. Do we have Carol Rouse on the line? Oh, someone's just coming in. Right, so we're just going through a list of speakers here. I don't know who's just. Hello, who's that? Who's just?
Hello, Martin Wright. Martin Wright. Sorry, I had trouble in unmuting myself.
Oh, Mr. Wright. Oh, sorry. Yes, you're absolutely on my list. Yes, it was Mr. Wright and Mr. Weir who've made a representation. So yes, Mr. Wright. Sorry, if you'd like to go ahead now, and we'd love to.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, there are a few comments I'd like to make upon seeing other representations and the applicant's comments to those representations. First of all, concerning the public bridleway through the application site, and I note that the applicant submitted a summary or supplemental information to Liz Francis, which was forwarded to Robert Fraser on the 27th of November. And I think it does contain some misconceptions about highway. The public bridleway does form part of the public highway. Whether this is maintained by the local authority or not, or whether it's owned by the local authority or not. And a simple search on Google Wikipedia will confirm that any public right-of-way does then form part of the public highway. Now, there is a saying that ownership is 9/10 of the law, and that means that 1/10 of the law concerns activities where other people's rights over the land takes precedent over how the landowners would like to use that land, either for their own personal or private use. And I have spent about the last 35 years in local government concerned with such land, namely common land and town and village greens. And in recent years, my colleagues deal with public rights of way issues, where the rights of the public do take precedence over the owner's rights. Now, I'm not disputing that the applicant owns the site, but this does include the route of the public highway. And however, the public right to use the public bridleway at any time of the day or night, this must take precedence over any other use the land that the owner may wish. So, to put simply, the bridleway must take precedence over any bride and groom wishing to use it as part of their private wedding reception venue. And as such, I do not see how the applicant can abide by the police request to remove people from his land when, as I understand the law, the applicant has no authority to remove people from a public highway, even though that public highway exists on his land. Secondly, I think that the British Horse Society makes a sombre point about health and safety issues. And I have lived long enough to have experienced a work colleague who lost his only son whilst attending a wedding reception. What should be one of the happiest days in a couple's lives and for their family and close friends can turn to tragic circumstances all too quickly. And the mix of alcohol, music, and a public bridleway through the middle of the proposed wedding site, it's not a highway adjacent to or near to, it actually goes through the middle of the site, I think has too many ingredients where a tragic accident could occur. And thirdly, concerning noise issues, yes, I am one of the nearest neighbours. I also live with my mother and father at the same address, and maybe it was my father who the applicant was referring to earlier. My father is in his mid-80s and is quite deaf, and therefore does not see or think that the music will cause him any problems. And I think that's one of the primary reasons why he is not objecting to this application. But I note with interest that the applicant's comments that listening to music is relaxing, not only for him but also for animals, and I don't disagree with that. I've heard that playing classical music whilst cows are being milked produces a higher milk yield. And if classical music were to be played for 6 hours of the evening until midnight, then I might well get out my deck chair and enjoy a free Glyndebourne experience. But the application is for disco music to be played. And disco music has its origins in the United States urban nightlife scene. And I think this is why I and my near neighbours object to this application. We have no wish for urban nightlife culture to be thrust upon our rural households and neighbourhoods. We're not against noise. Indeed, the applicant has mentioned several countryside noises which we accept. Cows bellowing from their separated offspring, owls hooting to each other across the valley, and cockerels crowing at first light. And what a noise such a small creature can make. The disco music, which would be for several evenings of the year, is not an alternative to these existing countryside noises. It is in addition to them. and it will disturb the rural nature of the countryside, something which, according to the applicant's own submissions, attracted them to buying Little Roseveth in the first place. But if this application succeeds, it would now deny the very thing that attracted them to the valley, to their near neighbours, largely the quiet and tranquil enjoyment of the countryside, not adverse urban nightlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. I certainly appreciate your comments there. So I
can also make further comments in respect of questions raised earlier. We live about just under 200 metres from Little Roseveth. The neighbours you were speaking to earlier, Mr. and Mrs. Foote, live just over 300 metres from Little Roseveth. Also, Mr. Parker talked about the alternative road being used as opposed to the bridleway. The distance of the bridleway comes to about half a mile, whereas the alternative road distance would be about 3/4 of a mile. Okay. So the road journey would be about 1/4 of a mile longer. Okay. And there was also a comment that was made earlier about how often the lane has been used recently. I would add that for most of this year there have been signs at either end of the bridleway that because of COVID-19 they have been asking members of the public not to use the right-of-way. Yeah. So I think that has had an effect on the number of people recently using this public bridleway. Okay.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wright. Those are helpful comments, and of course your experience in local government is helpful as well. I'm going to bring in our legal advisor right now. So Mark Andrews has put up a question here. So.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll withdraw that. I don't need to ask a question now, but thank you for coming to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I don't want to ask Mr. Wright a question, but I just want to make a short statement for the sake of transparency. I did know Mr. Wright. We both worked for Cornwall County Council for a period of time and have had a number of conversations over the years, but he hasn't contacted me about this application, and we don't mix socially. So I will treat his representations the same as anybody else's, but I thought I should say that publicly.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Brown. That's much appreciated. Do members have any other questions for Mr. Wright at all? Okay. The application is not to actually have the weddings on the bridleway. Is that correct, Mr. Wright? But they would have to cross the bridleway to use the toilets and things like.
I'm just looking at the plan which the applicant submitted for their application, and because they've included the holiday cottages, which is on the eastern side of the right-of-way, and the other side of the venue, which is on the western side, and the toilets are on the eastern side, I can't help feel that the bridleway, the public highway, goes through the middle of this application site. And I can't help but feel that this makes this particular application site quite unique in having that public highway through the application site.
Okay. That's fine. So the hours, I think it's worth you raising the issue of the concern about the hours. We want to make sure that what they're applying for is what's in the application. I believe it was till midnight, not 11 o'clock. And then I'm just wondering if the condition that was suggested about limiting the number of events to 7 is helpful to you at all.
It's helpful. It would be more helpful if the events were limited to like a Friday or Saturday evening at the weekend, rather than on an evening when I have a working day the next day.
Okay.
Out of courtesy, I would say, in respect of the previous wedding that was held, the family wedding, out of courtesy, Mrs. Parker did call on us after the event, and that was appreciated, and asked if we were disturbed by the noise. I felt a little guilty at the time by saying yes, we were, but that was not a criticism as such. It was just a comment that was the case. But being a family occasion, a one-off once a year, we certainly weren't going to complain about the use of their land for a family wedding.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Have you had any other issues with the business that's been run there for the past 5 years?
Yes, only minor issues. I think one of the holiday cottages is known as Little Roseveth Cottage, which has a very similar name to our residence of Roseveth Cottage. So we do get a number of people arriving during the year, expecting to be shown their bed and breakfast accommodation, and having to tell them that they've arrived at the wrong location. Okay. But apart from that, no, we haven't. Okay, that's fine. Well, look, Mr. Wright, I really appreciate your representations and for taking the time to come out today. Do members have any other questions for Mr. Wright before we move on? Okay, I will take that as a no. I'm not seeing any X's or hands or anything like that. So that's fine. So do we have anybody else who's on the line now, either Mr. Fraser or Gina Harvey or Lucy Wilson or Dave and Jenny Thomas or Carol Rouse who wish to make any representations? If not, that's fine. We can move on from there. So we have a chance now, members, to ask questions of anybody that we'd like to ask questions of. So applicant, people making representations, licensing officers, police. Do we have any questions for any of those people? Otherwise, we're going to go to the applicant for their final submission. Okay, then. Mr. Parker, if you're on the line, make sure you take your microphone off of mute. And now is your time for your final submission, so to address any concerns that you may have heard in the last few minutes.
Can you hear me now?
I can indeed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just want to make a few comments about what was said. We have no issue with agreeing to give notification to the council of when we're going to have an event, simply because there aren't going to be that many. Okay. The comments made by the nearest neighbour, both by Mr. Foote and Mr. Wright. Firstly, I think for Mr. Wright to make comment about his father having an opinion and that his reason for his opinion was because he's deaf, I think is unfair on him. If he wishes to come to the meeting and say that, then that's fine. For him to say it, I think is really slightly unfair. As far as the public highway is concerned, yes, it is public right of way. I have no argument about that whatsoever. It isn't going through the middle of the wedding, and it sounds as though it's a bit like the reports you get in the Daily Mail where somebody's public right of way is going through the middle of someone's house and somebody walks through it. It's not like that at all. It's to the side of the wedding. The people, in order to site the toilets so that they're not actually on the wedding site causing disruption to the wedding, they had to be sited on the opposite side. Every person who attends that wedding has as much right to walk on that bridleway as any other person in this country. And if you stop, not you, I'm not saying you, if it stopped to have weddings like this, then you would have to stop just about every pub in this country, because people come out of pubs onto a public highway. I don't think that, I think it's an observation, but I don't think it's a valid reason. What's really important to understand, and I want to reiterate this very, very strongly, is that it is my responsibility as the license holder, and if the premises license is granted for the license of the premises, to ensure that nobody is intoxicated, and if they are, that they are removed. And I can assure you 100% that they will be. I'm very, very sorry that Mr. Wright has said that he was disturbed with the music and that he would listen to classical music, but he wouldn't listen to any other music. And as far as his comments with reference to cows, and that they're playing classical music, and that's what increases their milk production. As a veterinary surgeon, I attend many farms, and I have not come across one farm where I've been to into the parlour where they play classical music. They are playing disco music all the time, and none of the cows are disrupted or cause any problem with that at all. So for him to make that comment, I think is disingenuous. People arriving at the wrong place. I have in my property probably about a couple of people a month trying to deliver things to me to my property, which is called Little Rosebeth, instead of going to Great Rosebeth, and I have to redirect them. As a member of the community, I have no issues with that person arriving in my property having made the wrong turn, and I don't see it as an impingement on my privacy or having an effect on me at all. All I do is I say to them, please explain to them exactly how to get to the property they wish to go to. As far as the people arriving in holiday cottages is concerned, if you want to check with people who market the properties for me, they give strict instructions of how to get to this property. I'm absolutely amazed that he's been disturbed as many times as he claims with reference to people coming in. I don't see, quite honestly, that it's got anything to do whatsoever with an application for a premises license. And yeah, the other thing is that our property, the only property that has got any resemblance whatsoever to his property is Rose Cottage. It has no reference other than it's Rose Cottage. So for him to say that that's causing an issue for him, I'm sorry. He then brought up the point about the alternative route. He said, I don't know whether he was trying to correct me or not, but he said it's a quarter of a mile further on. Well, that's exactly what I told the committee earlier on. I basically said that it's a quarter of a mile further. And the other thing is, as far as the timing of the event is concerned, we've applied for what's on the license. If the committee sees fit to adjust that, then that's fine. But it is a wedding. We're talking about half an hour or an hour difference, and we would ensure and make absolutely sure that the whole thing was wound up at the time that your committee decides is the right thing to do. As far as he also brought up about notices at the end of the lane, and that's why people haven't been coming down the lane. In fact, there have been more people using the bridle path during the COVID times than there have in normal times, simply because more people have been furloughed and are at home and locally are walking around and using a route that they don't normally use. And they also, we put the notices up simply because I am regarded as a vulnerable person because I've got a heart condition, but it's a minor one, but I am regarded as that. And that's the only reason that we did it, and the advice of my doctor. And so I don't really see that the points that he's been putting forward have a total relevance to the licensing of a premises. I think that's all I've got to say, unless anybody's got any particular questions in reference to what they have said about the application.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Parker. So do members, Councillor Evans and Councillor Brown, have any questions of clarification here for Mr. Parker?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. Right. Well, if we have no further questions, we're at the point in the meeting where we will retire to obtain legal advice. And then we'll stop the live stream. We'll come back onto the live stream where we'll discuss the proposal and vote on that, and then that will be the decision. So, Emma, are you there to read our exclusion statement?
I am, Chairman. Yep, the exclusion paragraph is: resolve that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 5, information in respect of which any claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings, and that proceedings apart from the resolution passed shall remain confidential. Could I have a proposer, please?
I'm happy to propose that.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Yes.
Thank you. Is everybody in favour?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Therefore, could I ask officers, the applicant and other persons to leave the meeting?
Chairman, I'll just wait for confirmation when the live stream has paused.
Chairman, this is Emma Coe, Democratic Officer. I can confirm that the live stream is now resumed. So could I have a proposer to move into the public session?
Yeah, I propose that we move back into public session.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you. Everybody in favour?
Yes.
In favour?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. You can proceed now.
Thank you so much. Right, so if I could ask our legal counsel to read out the proposal, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is Mark Andrews, solicitor. Can you just confirm you can hear me before I read out the proposal?
I can hear you, thank you.
Thank you very much. So the proposal is as follows. So it's arising from consideration of the report, the evidence, submissions from all parties, having regard to the statutory guidance, the Council's policy and the Licensing Act 2003, the application to grant the premises licence for Little Rose Veth, Tregavethen, Truro, be granted subject to the following conditions in order to promote the licensing objectives. 1. The premises shall be limited to holding 7 events per calendar year using the marquee and 4 additional other events per calendar year not using the marquee. 2. A notice either in written form or by electronic means shall be given to the licensing service of Cornwall Council at least 14 days before any event is held at the premises. Excuse me. 3. Members noted that the applicant had agreed additional conditions with the police in advance of the subcommittee hearing, which shall be attached as conditions to the licence in order to promote the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objective. Members noted the representations against the application being granted and set out in the report. Members also heard from a number of other persons in person in support of the representations. Dealing with the various points raised in the representations, 1. In respect to the representations relating to the premises being in a quiet rural area and the concerns regarding noise from events at the premises, the subcommittee noted where the premises is situated, but felt that the licence as granted would not undermine the licensing objectives. The subcommittee further noted that no representations were received from any of the responsible authorities in this regard. 2. In respect of the representations raised relating to the premises leading to disorder from customers, litter, dangerous traffic due to the narrow lanes, and that there would be antisocial behaviour, members noted that no concerns have been raised by the responsible authorities in relation to these matters and did not feel that there was evidence that this would occur. 3. In respect of the representations relating to the bridleway at the premises, members noted the representations, but further noted that the applicant had stated they had no intention to restrict use of the bridleway, and they accepted that they would be responsible for ensuring that it could continue to be used. 4. In respect of the representations relating to parking at the premises, members note that the applicant stated that they had a large parking area at the premises that would be used by customers. 5. Taking all the information into account, including the representations from the other persons, members concluded that granting the variation application would not undermine the licensing objectives, and therefore felt that it was reasonable and proportionate to grant the application subject to the additional conditions. Members further note that if issues did arise at the premises, then the premises licence could be subject to a review by the other persons or by the responsible authorities. That's the proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do any of the members wish to propose?
Yes, I'd be happy to propose that. Malcolm Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. And I'm happy to support approval, grant of the application with the conditions as read.
Thank you, Chairman. I can therefore confirm that it's a unanimous decision to grant, subject to the conditions as read out by the legal officer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 4.2, which is the application to vary a premises license at the Bowgie Inn in Crantog, Newquay. Do we have the correct people on the line with us, or should we wait a few minutes and make sure we get everybody on the phone?
Only one person has joined, Chairman.
Okay. So I have on my list to speak Patrick Robson, who's a solicitor on behalf of the applicants. I do have the Pickles, Andrew and Sally listed here as well. I've got Crantock Parish Council, Tony Isles, Stuart and Geraldine Strathy, and Philip Jones are all listed on my list.
Chairman, it's Mark Andrews from Legal Services here. I don't know if the Democratic Services Officer are able to assist, but I noted that when we were in private session, there were an awful lot of phone numbers popping up and people were being put in the lobby.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they've given up and gone away or if they're still in the lobby. I don't know how it works, to be honest with you, but if someone could just clarify that and whether those people might need to be contacted.
Chairman, the people that attempted to join were not able to join, so they would need to redial in and telephone. Can the person who has joined via telephone just now please confirm their name, please?
So we've got Pickles here on a mobile number, but you've already got us on the meeting, right?
Okay. The people that attempted to join, and can that person now mute the live stream because we're getting background noise?
Hello?
Can you confirm your name? You've come through to the licensing meeting.
Yes, it's Dr. Ben Dobson representing Crantock Parish Council.
And can the other person identify themselves that's just dialed in, please?
Patrick Robson from John Gordon Partners for the applicant.
And can you mute your background live stream, please, so that we don't get interference?
Yeah, will do. Yes, it's Dr. Ben.
I'm not sure if the licensing officer can confirm if they've made contact with the applicants.
The applicants were on there. Did I hear the Pickles were on there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay. So we have legal counsel for the Pickles, which is Mr. Robson. We have, is both Mr. and Mrs. Pickles, Andrew and Sally, on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Dr. Dobson from Crantock Parish Council. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So I have a few other people on my list, but you know, I'm happy to wait a few minutes if we wish to contact people who've registered to speak, but I wouldn't want to delay too long.
Chairman, it's Mark from Legal, Mark Andrews from Legal again.
Yep.
Can I just clarify, if people phone in, because there were an awful lot of phone numbers popping up, so if people phone in and they're put in the lobby, or perhaps it's a question for licensing, if people are told in advance of the meeting, are they told that they might have to ring back in again, or how does it work, please? Just for my benefit and for the benefit of those people watching the live stream.
Chairman, I think the process should be that the licensing team ask them to dial in when the application has started on the live stream to stop the situation where people are trying to dial in too early. I'm not sure if they're told that they might need to redial in, but they are told to view it via the live stream link, so they should be watching it. So should there be anyone watching the live stream who needs to speak at this meeting, now would be the time for them to dial in with the numbers that were provided.
Was that clear, Mark?
If the licensing officer can contact the other expected participants to see if they are able to join, that will be helpful.
Yeah, it's Mark from Legal again. Yeah, if the licensing officer could confirm that they are either doing or have done that, please. And I'm just conscious that we're going to start the meeting and then people are going to join late.
Yeah, and I'd rather have them all here at the start. So Liz, if you're able to contact Mr. Ailes or the Strathys or Mr. Jones, that would be really helpful.
I will do that now.
Thank you. So Liz, have you been able to contact anybody, or hopefully you're not on another line?
Not as yet. I've had to send an email because I didn't have a phone number on one. The other one hasn't answered my call, and the other one I'm just doing now.
Okay.
Chairman, it's Rowena Bremner, meeting producer. Can the person that has literally just joined the meeting via telephone please identify themselves, please?
Yes, I've been attending the meeting since 1 o'clock and I seem to have been timed out for some reason. My name is Philip Jones.
Okay, thank you.
I'm inclined to give it another 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and then start. Mark, what's your view on that?
Hi, Chairman, it's Mark from Legal. Yeah, I think that's fine. My main concern, Chair, was that there were a lot of people ringing in previously who, you know, wouldn't have been able to access because we weren't on at that time. But I think we've given them a fair opportunity now, and the fact that that gentleman that's just joined us has managed to get back in is a good sign. So, yeah, I think that's okay, Chairman. I just wanted to give a little bit of time for people if you know, if necessary. Thank you.
So we'll resume the meeting at 5 minutes past 3. Mr. Jones, apologies that you've had difficulty getting in this morning. The meeting did start at 1. We had another application prior to that, though, so I'm sorry about that. And hopefully somebody did tell you that we might not be needed until a little bit later.
Yes, but I'm trying to speak to the Bowgie application.
Yes, and we will be absolutely correct, Mr. Jones. You're here for the correct application. We'll be speaking to the Bowgie in just a few minutes. We're just waiting to see if any other people are trying to join the call who've been unable to.
Yes, but that applies to me, and I've tried to get back on several times, so I'm not very happy that people have been
we actually haven't started this looking at the Bowgie yet, sir, so you haven't missed anything. We've looked at a different application prior to this one.
No, I appreciate that. What I'm saying is that were people who were logged on previously, who are objectors to the Bowgie, are now logged off, that seems to have happened through a glitch in the conference mechanism and not due to those people being uninterested.
No, I understand your concern. So what would have happened, Mr. Jones, is that we would have been in a closed session considering the proposal and the decision on the previous application. So any calls that were coming through at that time we would have been unable to take because we were in a private closed session. And if we'd accepted them, they would have been party to our discussion. So we couldn't have let them into a waiting room or held them on. Now, just to reassure you, we have all of the physical representations that have been sent to us. We have quite a number of pages of, over 30 objectors, as well as letters of support that have come in recently as well. So we have all the written objections as well. So even though people may not be able to attend in person, we absolutely take into consideration all the representations.
When you say letters of support, I have not received any copies of those letters.
Chairman, it's Emma Code, Democratic Officer. Can I just advise that any letters that have come in have been published online, and the website is up to date with all that information. And also just let anybody know that for this second item, the licensing team did advise that anybody should be watching on the live stream, and then they should join the meeting once that first item had ended.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So apologies, Mr. Jones.
I have not received any notification of any letters of support or any advice to look online to see these letters.
Okay, I apologize.
The only documents I have seen are those sent to me, including the application, the objections to the application, to which there were no supporting letters at that time, and a document sent from the Bowgie, I think, to all those who objected on or around the 10th of December by letter and by email. I have not received any notification of any other documents.
Well, I apologize for that. Absolutely, they are published online. I didn't receive documents either. But
so how can the meeting go ahead if these documents haven't been considered?
Well, I have the documents. They're available online. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I think the licensing officer would like to come in, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to inform you that all emails were sent with regards to the notice of attendance, where there was a link to state about supplementary information where those support letters would be found.
Thank you, Liz. That's helpful. So I've received them all, absolutely. So thank you for that. Sorry, I've lost you there, Mr. Jones.
I've just been muted and I didn't hear what was said by the proprietor at all.
Liz, could you repeat your statement, please? This is the licensing officer.
Yes, so the emails were sent out with regards to notice of attendance with a link to the agenda reports and any supplementary information. That the supplementary information would include the letters of support.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've not received any document making that clear. None at all. I do not accept that.
Hello, Chair. It's Mark Andrews from Legal here. Liz, can you confirm that you've sent an email to this gentleman or that you haven't sent an email to this gentleman, please?
I confirm I have, and I'm just bringing up when it was sent. Just one moment. Hello, sorry, Liz Francis, licensing officer. Apologies for the wait there. It was sent on the 23rd of December, and it was within the information of how to actually call in for states about supplementary information.
Could you just read that out, please, just for clarity? Thank you.
Okay. Apologies, it's deciding to. So it's the last little bit, the last paragraph. The report can be reviewed and downloaded on Cornwall Council's website in due course. Please also refer to this link for any supplementary information, and the link is stated there.
Chairman, it's Emma Coe, Democratic Officer again, and just to confirm that in addition to the agenda and reports that were published, there are also 2 supplementary agenda packs that are also published to the Council's website under the Licensing Act Subcommittee meeting for the 4th of January.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is start item 4.2. For the benefit of those who are joining the call with us now who may not have been on earlier in the day, I'd like us to go through introductions again if we could, and then I'll go through how the hearing will work here this morning. So my name is Jesse Foote. I'm the Cornwall Councillor for the St. Germans and Landulph Division and chairman of this meeting here today. Councillor Evans.
I'm Geoffrey Evans, Cornwall Councillor for Falmouth Arwenig.
Thank you.
And my name is Malcolm Brown, Councillor for the St. Austell Bethel Division.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Could I ask officers to introduce themselves as well, please?
Yeah. Emma Coe, Democratic Officer.
Mark Andrews, I'm the Solicitor advising the committee this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Liz Francis, Licensing Officer.
Julie Flower, Senior Licensing Officer. Rowena Brevner, Meeting Producer.
It's brilliant. Thanks, everybody. So just so everybody understands how this will work today, I'll just roll through the procedure with you. So we'll start off with the licensing officer, the licensing service, who will outline the matter. So we are here to consider the variation in the premises license for the Bowgie Inn. And so we'll first hear from the licensing service. At that point, members will have a chance to ask any questions of clarification to the licensing service. Then we'll hear from the applicant or their representative. So I understand that we have a representative here today for the pickle. So we have Mr. Robson here, who's here on behalf of the applicant. So we'll hear from the applicant or their representative. And then again, members will have the opportunity to ask any questions of the applicant or their representative. Now, we don't have any representations from responsible authorities from either within the council or from external to the council. So we won't be hearing anything from any responsible authorities. Nobody has objected. But we do have some representations from other persons. So we will then, after that, hear representations from other persons, and I do have a list of names here. Following that, members will have the opportunity to question those other persons on anything that they might have stated in relation to the application. The meeting comes to a close. Chairman and members will have an opportunity to ask any further questions of all parties at this point, and then the applicant gets the final submission. So the applicant will have the final right of reply after they've heard from we've heard from all the other persons on this application. The subcommittee can then seek any clarification on any points that have been made at that point by the applicant or the representative. The subcommittee will then retire. You'll all leave the call and we'll go into a private session where we'll discuss the application. We will come up with a proposal. We'll then come back into public session on a live stream where we will discuss that proposal and vote on it, and that will be the decision. So at that point, people who are interested in the decision can watch the live stream, or you can be contacted by our officers to hear the actual decision. I would ask that when people are making representations, they try not to repeat what representations that have been made by other persons. And I do also ask that the applicant, as you and the representative, you have the opening statement and the closing statement, as it were, that as we're going through the process, if you hear anything that you wish to address, just write that down and you can address it in your final submission. I would also ask that there's no cross-examination, that all questions will come through the chair. But that's basically it. Does anybody have any questions on how that process will work? You may have members sorry, Liz, you want to go ahead?
Just to clarify on the other person's representation, I haven't been able to get hold of Mr. Strathdy. I managed to contact his wife, but she is currently she's a GP and she's trying to get hold of him.
Okay.
Mr. Earls is in a meeting as per his email and may join later. I will try him a little later.
That's fine. Thank you so much for that, Liz. And I just want to reassure everybody who's here on the call today that members will be familiar with all of the representations that have been made. We'll have read the pack. We'll understand the major concerns here with this application. So even though you know, Mr. Strathdy can't be here or Mr. Ailes isn't here, we will have read and understand their objections to this, the representations to this application. So even though people aren't present, and there's a lot more people that have made representations who are not present, we absolutely take into consideration their concerns as well. Right, so if we can, sorry, I can see Mark Andrews, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify as well, because I remember the chap previously saying that he'd been muted. So if you aren't speaking, then it's likely that you will be muted, because otherwise we can hear background noise and it interferes with the live feed. So if you have been muted, then I understand you press *6 to become unmuted. So when it's your turn to speak, if you press star and 6, and we had a chap earlier that tried that, it didn't work, so he rang back in using the same details that he'd been provided with. So *6 is your first port of call when you're asked to speak. The chairman will ask you to speak when it's your turn. And yeah, that I just wanted to clarify that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mark. Much appreciated. So if we can start with the licensing service, who will outline the matter for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. An application has been received from Mr. Andrew Pickles for the variation of the premises licence in respect to the Bowgie Inn in Crantock. As you will see in the report on pages 44 to 48, the variation application is to extend the hours, extend the opening hours, extend the hours of licensable activities, add a licensable activity of late night refreshment, remove the licensable activity of performance of dance, and amend the conditions. The current licence can be found at Appendix 1, pages 54 to 62 of the report pack. There have been no objections from responsible authorities, detailed on pages 48 and 49 of the report pack. There have been 24 representations from other persons. These are detailed in Appendix 3, pages 64 to 112. As a result of representations received from other persons, the applicant has contacted the other persons. This information has been provided by the applicant's solicitor and is found in the supplementary addenda, pages 17 to 106. Some responses from other persons have been received, and these can be found on the supplementary agenda, pages 107 to 111. Letters of support were received this morning from the applicant's solicitor, which have been published as additional supplementary information. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Liz. Do members have any questions for our licensing officer at all? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So we're going to move on to the applicant, or their representative rather, which is Mr. Robson here. So Mr. Robson, if you'd like to present the application to us and address any concerns, please. You might be on mute as well.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chair. Good, excellent. Right, I'm off mute, thank you. Right, good afternoon, Chair, and other members. Right, so my name is Patrick Robson from John Gaunton Partners on behalf of the applicant and the premises licence holder Andrew Pickles, who's also joined by Sally Pickles, his partner. Between them, they've stacked up much more than 50 years experience in the licence industry. They've run this particular premises for many, many years, with Mr. Pickles being the premises licence holder, at the very least since the new law came into force in 2005 under this new licensing act from back then. So for over 20 years, the premises has been run as a pub restaurant, but with the ability to provide functions and events, which are important for a village country pub to be able to provide. So they can cater for weddings, funerals and charity events and such matters. And also, of course, helps provide a revenue stream for the premises, and also a revenue stream to help retain staff through the winter period and boost staffing hours during the quieter times of the year as well. They employ about 30 permanent staff drawn from a local area, and in the summer they often recruit another 20 staff or so, often sort of students and seasonal workers. And and the premises also a home to some of those staff members. Any one time you might get between 15 and 20 staff living in, sometimes as much as sort of 6 months in a year due to the season. Now, Sally and Andy pride themselves in very much being part of the community and helping the community, not just by employing local people, but also sponsoring local sports teams, sponsoring things like the Cornwall Seal Group. And over the years, they've raised more than £50,000 for the Cornwall Hospice care as well, across a 10-year period. And you'll have seen the number of documents I've included in the bundle in the supplementary agenda, and that's just a fraction of what was provided to me in terms of positive media coverage of what they've done over the years. And they're very proud. You can see recently they've also won the BII Staff Welfare Award as well in these sort of trying COVID times. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of the ethos that they have, that they care about their staff and their responsibilities to the local community. For the application itself, several years ago they decided to invest in refurbishment of the premises, part of which resulted in internal layout changes which were completed last year. So previous to that, the premises was for all intents and purposes split into two, and you will see then part of the bundle I included a copy of the old layout plan on page 18 of that bundle, and that shows, if you see it or familiar with it, there was what was known as the public bar to the left-hand side of the premises, and that had and still does a midnight licence for selling alcohol, live music and recorded music. To the right-hand side of the premises on that plan is the Ocean Bar, and that has and still has a 2 AM licence for selling alcohol, live and recorded music. Each of those discrete areas had their own bar servery and were separated by partitions and doors. And importantly, that Ocean Bar side of it, to the right-hand side, has been operated to 2 AM historically with sale of alcohol and entertainment with no issues. So the refurbishment removed that bar servery from the Ocean Bar side of the premises and created this more open plan layout across the whole venue, and created a very lovely feature bar in the public bar side. So that's now the only bar servery point. So at the time, a variation was submitted a couple of years ago to approve that new proposed layout, and I included a copy of that plan as well, just so you can see what it looks like currently. I think that's page 19 of the bundle. And just if you want to have any doubt whatsoever, that new layout is already granted under a previous application, so that is not part of today's application. That's already in place and approved. At that time of that previous application, the applicant also volunteered to include numerous conditions on the licence in order to modernise it and update it. And by my calculation, I think the number of conditions in Annex 2 of the licence went from about 3 to 28 conditions. So I think that shows the applicant very much takes seriously the promotion of the licensing objectives and their willingness to commit to a large tranche of legally binding conditions in that manner. Clearly, of course, it would not be ideal to have an open plan premises with different licensing hours across it, particularly when you've only got one bar servery area. So first and principally, the application sought and seeks to regularise the licence hours across the whole venue, so no longer different hours for different parts of the premises. I will mention the other parts of the application as well, but I think there's also the context here of guidance. Paragraph 9.37 is important, which states that authorities should focus hearing on the steps considered appropriate for the promotion of licensing objectives and avoid straying to undisputed areas. And I think that's reflected in the bundle documents as well, produced by your licensing officer. So there are some parts of the application clearly generated more concern, so I'm going to focus on them, you'll be pleased to know, and equally others have not been mentioned at all or barely mentioned, so I will spend less time addressing those. And one element of the application not mentioned whatsoever, not once that I could see, is the commencement of licensable activities from 9 AM. So on the basis that hasn't caused any controversy, I'm not going to dwell on that and submit that as per the guidance I just mentioned. It's an undisputed area that should be put forward for a grant. So secondly, the application requested a terminal hour across the whole premises of 2 AM on a daily basis. And as I say, the reason behind that was to try and regularise the licensed hours across the whole premises. And clearly that's generated the most concern, so I will deal with that a little bit later on. But I think it's important at this stage that to note that the application is not trying to extend the terminal hour Monday through Saturday beyond that which can already be traded at the venue. So in other words, they've already got a 2 AM licence for a large portion of the premises. There's no intention for any operational changes. They're merely seeking to continue to use their current later 2 AM hours for events and functions as the application itself stated. So there's no new activities would occur. It's a continuation of what they can do in the Oceanside bar of the premises, but the flexibility to do that throughout the whole venue. And I'll come back to that a little later. Thirdly, the application wants to remove performance of dance. Again, that shouldn't be controversial. There's no objections to that. And again, that reinforces the point that premises is not going to turn into a nightclub in removing that activity. Fourth, wholesale hours. Again, that really shouldn't be controversial. late night refreshment is the provision of hot food or hot drink after 11 p.m. So without adding it to the licence, it creates this situation where it's perfectly lawful to sell alcohol to a customer at midnight currently, at 1 a.m. currently, at 2 a.m. currently, but to sell them a tea or coffee would be illegal. And clearly, in our view, that would appear to be a nonsense. So they're looking to add late night refreshment as a secondary activity, really, just to have that ability and flexibility. And the fifth thing is they're looking to add a door staff condition, which I would stress will be added to the licence, volunteered to add to the licence if the rest of the application is granted as sought for the 2 a.m. across the board, across the whole venue. And that condition you'll see in the application is to deploy SAS store supervisors when open for the sale of alcohol after midnight. So until midnight, not needed, but if they're going to sell alcohol after midnight, they must have door staff deployed. Again, I do not think that ought to be controversial. The applicant is putting forward a very robust and responsible measure to promote the licensing objectives if the application is granted. I've seen there's some objections seem to criticise that being put forward, but that cannot be the case. It's an extra measure they're willing to put forward to address and promote the licensing objectives. And the last thing the application seeks to do was there's two conditions about open containers on the licence. One that states they can't sell alcohol for consumption off the premises other than in sealed containers, and the other one that they should not remove open containers from the premises except in a delineated external area shown on the plan. This is only a slightly complex one in that it's me with my legal hat on trying to end a slight contradiction these two conditions could create, particularly as some people do if the premises, the definition of premises is legally taken to be the extent of the licensed area, because that may prevent arguably open containers being taken into current drinking external areas. So there's no intention to have open containers on the beach or anything like that. It's merely a new condition to replace those two to clarify that no alcoholic drinks can be taken outside the premises except for consumption in external areas provided for that purpose. And that's the premises external areas within their demise, not other external areas. So that's just it was a minor change to those conditions, which I would hope not be controversial. Now, in terms of representations, I think one of the most salient points I will make today is possibly who has not represented against this application. And there's none before you today from any of your responsible authorities, and I would suggest the absence of objections from these parties can only be taken as a positive inference. The police are your statutory body identified for their expertise in crime disorder, and you will be well aware you should, as a licensing authority, look to the police as your main source of advice on matters of crime disorder. Of course, that's guidance paragraphs 2.1 and 9.12, and as echoed in your licensing policy as well. The police have no concerns with the proposals, otherwise they'd be here today arguing against the application, and I'd ask you to place substantial weight to that fact. Furthermore, the police had no suggestions of extra conditions to add to the licence or requested any amendment to it. And I know they've definitely considered the application, as I spoke to Sue Edwards about it myself in November. And I'm not sure she's still in today's meeting. I know she's in the early hearing. But I asked her if she had any concerns, and she said she had no concerns with the application at all. And I followed that by saying, was the premises on her radar currently or for any reason previously? And she stated she'd never been there in 17 years. So in her mind, that showed it's very much not on her radar at all. And anecdotally, from my point of view, very rare in my experience to be in a hearing relating to a premises with a track record with no police visit in the last 17 years, in at least the last 17 years. Quite extraordinary in my view. Your environmental health team as well, they're your statutory body identified for expertise in noise, nuisance, noise disturbance. So again, it's reasonable to expect your environmental health officer to intervene if there was concerns with the application about noise nuisance, guidance paragraph 9.15, of course. I spoke to Mike Thompson, your environmental health officer, in November. He just wanted assurance that no entertainment would be taking place externally, which I confirmed to him, and I pointed him to the application, which confirms it's all ticked indoors only on the application itself, and that's satisfied in that there won't be outside entertainment, and he emailed the licensing team to confirm that discussion. So there's no objection from him either today, and so again, I would suggest the inference is that both the police and environmental health, along with the other responsible authorities, have no issues. If any of them looked at their records and saw a host of antisocial behavioural complaints or noise complaints, they would be here today. And no objection and no suggestion again from the environmental health officer to amend the application or even propose extra conditions to address any concerns. So for the objections that have been received, of course there's a legal framework to your decision making, which is an evidence-based decision. Of course the premises is not an accumulative impact area, so the onus is very much on the objectors to provide evidence as to why the application or parts of it should be refused. Of course, there may be speculation as to what might happen if it's granted, or fears of what could happen, but they are not evidence. What is evidence is that there are no objections from the police, no objections to environmental health, and also the track record of the business, having a 2 AM licence already for many years without issues. And as a general point about objections, of course, to be a relevant representation, guidance paragraph 9.4, for representations in relation to variation to be relevant, the guidance says they should be confined to the subject matter of the variation. So again, this is not a review application, it's a variation application only. Any decision and any objections need to relate to the application at hand, not what some objectors think the application is proposing when it certainly is not. So turning to the objections, you might be pleased to know I'm not going to go through each one in turn. I will just pick out some of the themes that have been stated, especially as many of them do raise sort of the same points. Before I do so, I think it's worth noting that we believe many objectors did misunderstand the application, and so to address that, the applicant wrote to each objector by letter and by email, and those were the copy emails in the bundle put forward, which I think you will have read, just to try and correct these misunderstandings. And that correspondence also put forward a without prejudice offer of another condition to be included on the licence if the application was granted, that licence for activities terminating after midnight will be limited to 50 times in a calendar year. That was intended to be a further comfort to all parties that any feared late opening is not meant to be a regular occurrence. And although that was put in without prejudice in that letter, the applicant is very much still willing to offer that today to the licensing committee and happy to include that as part of the revised application. So turning to the themes of some of the objections, quite a few started talking about planning matters. So speaking quite robustly, planning is not relevant to this licensing application. Planning and licensing are separate regimes. The premises has the correct planning in place, and any disappointment about that from the local community has nothing, quite frankly, to do with this particular application. So I don't really particularly plan to address that further unless members have any particular questions. Similar comments really a little bit to sort of roads and parking that were issues raised. Again, these aren't particularly relevant to a licensing application. In my view, they're more a matter for planning and highways. In any event, there's ample parking at the premises, I would say. And again, the objectors don't give any evidence of roads or parking issues when the premises has traded late. The premises has a 2 AM licence for at least half the premises, and when they have traded late, there's no objectors that have acknowledged that or have said that currently causes issues in terms of roads or parking. There's quite a few references to historic issues as well, particularly large amount of comments about issues from the 1970s, the 80s and the 90s, and that's going on for 30, 40 and 50 years ago, and that's certainly not relevant to this application. Again, it's indicative of fears of what might happen without an evidential basis for thinking. So I would say what is relevant to the application is the police licence costs again, and the licensing team at the police have not had to visit this premises in 17 years for any sort of adverse issues or at all. And actually some of these concerns that have been raised actually provide an evidential basis in support of the application in some ways. For example, there's one objector, Mr. Isles, for any late licence he said had not been in place since the 1990s. Well, of course, they've actually had a 2 AM licence at least since the Licensing Act came into force 15 years ago, and that late licence has been utilised over the years. It's not necessarily an overly regular occurrence, but it has been used. And the fact that quite a lot of residents did not realise this in their objection shows that when the late licence has been used, clearly there cannot have been any problems with it, as otherwise objectors would be referencing and expressing concern about issues when the premises has traded later. And I suggest, in terms of all the letters and emails for support, you could compare those against the objectors, and the supporting letters do acknowledge late hours have been traded, and a lot of them are local residents and businesses confirming they've had specifically no issues when that has occurred. A lot of concern the premises are going to somehow turn into a nightclub, and that is simply not going to be the case. The layout of the premises is as per that approved plan in the bundle. That cannot change unless another application is being submitted. You will hopefully have seen the photos I submitted in the bundle. I think that's pages 87 to 91, showing very much a lovely pub restaurant interior. There was no dance floor, there was no room for a dance floor. There's a great big feature bar in the premises. If they wanted to remove that feature bar and create some space for a dance floor, they would have to put in an application to do so. There's no DJ booths, no podiums. These are the things you would need to put in place for some sort of nightclub operation. The application removes performance of dance as an activity. Furthermore, to alleviate concerns, that further condition was offered, saying that alcohol being sold after midnight would be limited to very much a maximum of 50 times per year. So the current application, if anything, moves the premises further away from ever being able to operate as a nightclub. But we are requesting this 2 AM licence across the premises, and that's clearly caused the most controversy, which seems to be hand in hand with the belief from some this might become a nightclub. One objection suggested granting the application until 11 p.m. and then using a special events license for events. Another suggested restrict the license to midnight only. And again, so those sort of comments lead me to believe that there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of the application. The premises already has a midnight license for one half of the premises and a 2 a.m. license for the other half of the premises. There's no extension of later hours sought in the traditional sense, but a regularisation of hours across the premises because of those layout changes making it open plan. Currently, if the applicant wanted to, subject to not having any COVID restrictions in place, it could operate the 2 a.m. side of the business every single night of the year to 2 a.m. if they wanted to do so. The licence already permits that. So the current licence is in effect half the premises could trade to 2 a.m. 365 days of the year if they wanted to do so, which they do not, because they have not and they do not intend to do so. The application, together with that other condition, restricting 50 times per year beyond midnight across the whole venue, is actually a huge decrease in a way, because they've got a 2 a.m. licence for 365 days a year, but they're happy to commit to a 2 a.m. licence across the whole venue, admittedly, but only to 50 days a year. So that's 365 days down to 50 days per year. That's an 86% decrease in terms of the numbers of days that they could currently trade at 2 a.m. licence. And another point of note, of course, there were no complaints. Mr. Pickles have not received a complaint directly to them, to their knowledge, no noise complaints or antisocial behaviour complaints directed to the police or environmental health either. Otherwise, of course, they would have said so. The only issues flagged about noise or antisocial behaviour are those from 30 or more years ago in these objections, and that to say that premises has traded their 2 a.m. licence from time to time, clearly without causing issues. Otherwise, the objectors would be saying that they are aware the premises has traded later, and when it has, issues have been caused by that, but that is not the case. It's the same for the concerns about light pollution, which have been raised as well. There's no extra lighting will be required in the car parks due to this particular application if it's granted. And in fact, there is a lower car park as well near the premises that has its lights on. This is nothing to do with the premises. I believe this is a public car park, and I'm sure Mr. and Mrs. Pickles can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is one that has the lights on from dusk till dawn anyway, as a matter of course. There are already robust conditions as well on this particular licence regulating any entertainment that occurs later at night. And those are the three conditions I flagged to the objectors in those sort of emails and letters that were sent out. One of which, doors and windows should be kept closed after 11 p.m. or when regulated entertainment takes place, except for access and egress. No noise shall emanate from the premises or vibration transmitted through its structure to give rise to a nuisance. And if live recording music takes place, management should ensure noise levels are regularly monitored at the nearest noise-sensitive locations, and they'll keep a record of that as well. These are already built in to those conditions, robust conditions already placed on the licence, regulating those sort of potential late-night activities or late-night entertainment. You will hopefully have also seen a number of letters of support as well. There were, I think, 19 initially received before Christmas and a further 9 in a supplemental bundle. So that's a total of 28 sort of supporting letters. And if you've had a chance to review those, again, in my view, that's quite an unprecedented amount of positive support for a variation in my experience. And that is saying something. I've done licensing and nothing but licensing for 16 years. And it's something to actually obtain more letters of support in total than the letters of objection. And if you've read the letters and emails, it's sort of, you'll see there's a vast majority of those people are local residents and business owners living and working close to the premises, and they attest to having no issues with the premises, and in fact understanding it's already traded its 2 a.m. licence previously in the past, and it's caused them no issues. So in very brief, Mary Jones has lived in the vicinity for 10 years, no issues with traffic, noise, or anything in conjunction with the premises or its customers. Laura Millwood, long-time resident, no trouble or noise from customers. Carolyn Rossell, lived there 20 years, no late-night noise issues. Steve Symes, Sally Eastlake, ran a campsite business for 60 more years, no issues. Penny James Taylor, lived there 38 years, no issues with late-night revellers leaving the premises. Mrs. Wick runs a holiday let, only gets positive feedback from guests. I could go on and on and on. There's sort of a good number of them pick out specifically, they're aware the licence is traded later and have had no issues with it. George Bailey, no problem with people or traffic. Nigel Carroll Clapp, never any disturbance, etc., etc., etc. So again, you've got evidence in front of you from locals saying they're aware of the late night licence being traded from time to time, and that's not caused any issues, be it noise disturbance, disturbance from customers, disturbance affecting roads or traffic, which directly addresses some of those concerns the objectors have raised. So I think that's a useful reminder as well about guidance paragraph 9.44, which talks about licensing authority considering wider issues as, quote, such as other conditions already in place to mitigate potential negative impact and the track record of the business. So there are robust conditions already in place on this license. There's a robust condition offered by the applicant, cutting down significantly the ability, not just to trade into 2 AM, but cutting down the ability to trade sale of alcohol after midnight, cutting down that ability, if the application is granted, by 86%. There's an excellent track record here for this premises. It's traded to 2 AM many times over the years without complaints from the objectors, and in fact, you've got positive comments from local businesses and residents saying they've had no issues when it's traded later. And that's contrary to the fears of the objectors. Fears about what could happen is not evidence, but the experiences of those local residents and businesses is proper evidence in front of you. And very importantly, you have key advisors on the licensing objectives. The police and environmental health have raised no objections. And I will have more to say in my closing, but at this stage, that's the submission. So I'd respectfully ask and invite you to grant the application as put forward in the application, but with that extra condition offered as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Robson, for that. And yeah, as you mentioned, you'll have the right of reply. So if you hear anything up to that point, please write it down. You can address it in your final submission. So I'm conscious that the Pickles are here and that you are representing them. I just wanted to ask them if they wanted to add anything else to your statement, or if they're happy with your submission as it is.
We're both.
I think you said you're both happy there. Is that right?
Yeah, we're happy with everything that Patrick said. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. Do members have any questions for Mr. Robson at all, please? So, Councillor Brown, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Now you're on mute again.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Could I thank Mr. Robson for his very clear presentation? I just want to ask Mr. and Mrs. Pickles a question, because I have been to the Bowgie in the past, so I do know it, and I'm aware it's in a sort of tightly built up location with a lot of properties near to it. I was just wondering, I wasn't aware before I read about this application about the difficulties that there were 20, 30 years ago when one of the objectors, I think, said in writing that the license had actually been revoked for a time. I'm not asking about that, but I really wanted to ask, I think you may well have been the licensees at the time, and obviously you've had to think a lot since then about the change in your business model and the change in the nature of the pub. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit. The objectors say that it was a nightclub, and whether it was or not, that is a long way in the past. Clearly at the moment, if you look at the last few years, it isn't. And the way that you're proposing to change the way the premises are run, you are contending with I think, a fair degree of logic that it's likely to become even less so. But I was just wondering if you could say a bit about the way in which the premises are operated has changed, the all year custom that you've got. I'm not talking about the current COVID conditions, I'm talking about conditions before then. I just really want to understand a bit more about the, if you like, the ethos of the pub and how you think that's going to change in the future.
Okay, so it's quite a complex, long question. So I think quite a bit of background's already been given. Historically, the building was a farm, it was then a hotel, had a pub bar, and then live music sort of started off, and it became a really popular place, and like you say, busy nightclub. And with all of that, you know, youngsters came, people came from far and wide. It was kind of a bit ahead of its time, DJs coming down from London, things like that. So it was a really exciting place to be, and the nightclubs in Newquay weren't what they are now or what they have been in sort of recent decades. So it really was a place to be. There were quite a few rural pubs in the county, I think, that sort of did the same kind of thing. But since the late 80s, early 90s, nightclubs in Newquay have all tenfold their capacity. There are many more of them. The licensing reform in, I thought it was 2003, but Ms. Robin said 2005, 24-hour drinking for pubs. So Newquay has late venues that aren't clubs. They've got clubs that are now open till dawn. Newquay's also changed its dynamics as well. So it used to be known for underage drinking, used to be known for stag nights, and it was known for strip clubs. So over every decade, things change all the time. So obviously our nightclub, as it was, where we had acid house music, rock nights, really loud disco music, that whole era has gone, it's died. Things have changed with the licensing reform, with environmental health, with noise issues and things like that, temporary events notices. So obviously the business has changed along with that. We refurbished the nightclub bar completely with a license application back in, I think, 1999. We redesigned the bar, put in a centre bar, we put in sports screens, we started doing weddings. We actually, for 6 years, we had a civil ceremony license. So obviously to totally get away from the chewing gum on the floor and the bad reputation of being a nightclub and all of the detrimental publicity that would go along with that, we, have come a long way with creating a different image from a dark, seedy nightclub. So that's, that's what we promote now as a family venue, somewhere to come after you've been to the beach, somewhere to dine. We do quite a lot of wake, birthday parties, work dues, Christmas dues, charity dues, car clubs. So we have quite a broad spectrum of people that visit for a lot of reasons. And one of those reasons, might be an evening event. Obviously, they don't come for the view at that time of night, but I think, we're quite appraised for the tight ship that we run. Andy's been in the license trade through the different eras, from the early 70s. I've always been in hospitality, all probably since the mid 80s. And we've got about 10 personal license holders on our team. We're really passionate about what we do, and running a nightclub is not one of those things. Andy's 70, I'm not far off 50. So it's just a facility to be able to hold dues as and when the occasion arises, and hence we've already offered to change the number of occasions we would ever even dream of doing per year from 365 down to 50. I believe that you can, do temporary event notices for 15 or 20 a year anyway. So really, we've conceded quite a lot with what our original application was, just to transfer what we have already through our premises, through the whole premises.
Thank you very much. That's really informative, and you and your husband are both clearly very experienced and seen lots of changes. Just one supplementary question. If we think back to 12 months, say to the winter of last year before the pandemic struck, thinking about your winter clientele, were they mainly resident within the parish of Crantock, or even more so in West Pentire or from further afield? And what sort of age groups were your, if you like, winter core clientele? Again, I'm just trying to ask that just to understand a bit the nature of the premises recently.
Okay, so last winter we were still completing the refurbishment. So we had just opened the new feature bar, and were still, about 12 months ago today, would have been recommencing works on, what historically was the old disco, because we did it in 2 halves. So we didn't have to close, because, the thought of a business closure which we've all suffered now with COVID. So last winter isn't a typical winter with only having, with still having building work done, but going back sort of 12 months prior to that, we would have hosted evenings for the local hockey club, the local surf club, local businesses like local farm employers would have come for their Christmas dues. We've hosted fundraising evenings for local sea shanty bands, the local charities. Is that? And then, obviously our daytime trading would be Sunday lunch people, car clubs from, within the local area and within the county. So, broad demographic, we have, even several of the objectors come here and sometimes quite late of an evening for a pint. So it's quite alarming to see, people use the facility, objecting seemingly without all the facts being read by them. Local to Western Tyre, local to Crantock, and local beyond, Newquay and the county.
Thank you very much once again. That's the end of my questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Sally. Councillor Evans, do you have any questions at all at this point?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you both of you for that. So, Mr. Robson, and thank you, Sally Pickles, for that. It's really helpful to hear all that information. So, right, so I'm going to move on now to representation from other persons. So I have, hopefully Dr. Dobson is still on the line with us, who's here from Crantock Parish Council. So Dr. Dobson, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you might have to press *6 to do that, and then you can present your representation, please.
Good afternoon, normal greeting there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm just here to amplify the submission that was by our Chairman, Councillor Hallwood. As I'm fully aware that you will have all read the submission that was made. First of all, just to point out that the Parish Council recognises that the majority of the West Bend Tyre community who are directly impacted by this application are united in their opposition to the licensing application. In terms of the two grounds for objecting under public safety and prevention of public nuisance, under public safety, I'd just like to add that because of the remote location of the establishment, it does mean that the majority of customers arrive by vehicle by a narrow and unlit country lane with no separation between pedestrians and vehicles. The extension of the licence beyond the 12 o'clock will lead to a significant level of traffic during unsocial hours, perhaps as late as 3 o'clock, which will go both through the hamlet of West Bend Tyre and the village of Crantock. There's been, over the last 12 months, a significant number of new properties now at Halwyn Meadows, which abut the road at the entrance to the village, will be affected. In terms of prevention of public nuisance, I have nothing really to add to the comments that were made in the submission about the change in the main entrance and to the kitchens that back onto local properties. Finally, on the steps to alleviate, I think the council does fully support this business as, in old-fashioned terms, a public house, and it is an employer of local people, and for that we're very grateful. And we also support the principle of harmonising the licence conditions throughout the building following their modernisation. The proprietor has contacted the Parish Council with assurances that the extended licensing hours will only be exercised on a limited number of occasions during the year. However, at the moment, this is not a stipulated condition attached to the application. And we take the view that it would be more appropriate to grant what we call a traditional licence with temporary extensions for the few exceptional events that they envisage. In this era of taking back control, that would ensure that control remains with the licensing authority. I think that's all I would like to say.
Thank you for that, Dr. Dobson. I appreciate you joining the meeting and dialing in, and appreciate your representation there. Do members have any questions for Dr. Dobson? Councillor Brown. Oh, sorry. Who was that?
That was Sally, sorry.
Sally, so you guys have the right of final reply, so anything that you'd like to address, you'll have to address it in your final statement, okay?
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Brown, question, please.
Yeah, two questions really. Firstly, I was wondering if Dr. Dobson can advise us how many of the properties in West Pentyre are lived in all year, and how many seasonally. And I was also wondering, in his remarks, he talked about the 12 p.m. limit at the present time. Now, as it's been explained to us, the premises are part licensed to 2 a.m. Already, and I suppose the argument by the applicant is that following the changes to the internal fittings of the building, it's trying to regularise that. Now, I take it you don't accept that, but can you advise us what you think we ought to consider about the advice that we're being given about the ability of the licensee to operate to 2 a.m. at the present time?
In answer to your first question, I actually don't know the answer to that. I suspect it's around about 50% of the properties are seasonal and holiday in the West Pentyre area. In terms of your second question, then yes, we recognise that part of the premises currently has a 2 a.m. licence. I think that our view is that the assumption is that the whole premises now should move up to the 2 a.m. and I think our view is it should come back to the 12, so that the extensions for these few opportunities, when they were exceptional events, would then rest with the licensing authority rather than giving carte blanche to the potential to open on every night through the 365 days of the year.
Sorry, one supplementary. Do you have any special thoughts about Sundays and the extent to which Sundays may be different from the other 6 days of the week?
Personally, I don't. No. Sorry for the
no, thank you very much for those answers, which were meant to be challenging. That they weren't offensive. They were just to sort of get a bit more information out of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Dr. Dobson, for your representation. Well, I don't have any further questions for you, so we'll move on to Mr. Jones. If you're there, if you can unmute yourself, press *6, and you can come on and give us your representation, please, sir.
Can you?
I heard you for a second.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everybody.
Indeed.
Including Sally and Andy. I'm actually slightly related to Sally. However, I do have some objections to being told that our objections are invalid. I would ask the following question. Looking at the plan, what's referred to as the public bar appears to be the pigsty bar, and there is the ocean bar. And if you look at the plan for the guest areas, the ocean bar originally formed no more than 25%, not half, because the pigsty bar is larger and the restaurant areas are larger. And of course, the whole thing has now been expanded. The terrace has been doubled, and there is a beer garden outside. Now, no one is objecting to the way the Bounty has been run recently because there haven't been any objections. But I've been holidaying in the area for 30 years, and you can hear music on Seabay Apartments, where my wife and I own a holiday let, which we occupy about 6 weeks a year, and it's rented out for well, I would say over 30 weeks from through March through to December, really. So the statement that half the premises have a license to 2 a.m. is not correct from the plan as far as I can see it. And in any case, the number of customers that could be admitted must now be larger. So one question is, how many customers could be in the Ocean Bar before, and how many customers will be licensed to drink till 2 o'clock now? Secondly, there's been great play made of this nightclub. The nightclub has been raised by several people as similarly, not as a statement that they were literally a nightclub, but the nuisance would be exactly the same, because we'd have more people drinking for longer hours, leaving not at 2 a.m. but probably up to 2:30, probably carrying beer out with them, and probably in a large number of cases going on to the beach. So the noise, the disturbance would be considerable. Finally, I should also mention that I am actually a retired ENT surgeon. Noise levels are not actually so relevant. Clearly, if you've got a high level of noise, that's going to wake anybody up. But human beings aren't necessarily disturbed by noise. People fall asleep on trains or in airplanes, they're notoriously noisy. People fall asleep next to busy streets or railway lines. People are irritated by certain noises. One thing that will rouse anybody is hearing human voices, for example. So it's not just a question of the level of noise, it's the time of the noise at a quiet time of the night and the nature of the noise, which is likely to rouse anybody. So there are still a number of questions that haven't been raised. Incidentally, the plan of the previous club had a lobby restaurant, an upper restaurant, a games room, and a conference room, which shows quite what the size of the Ocean Bar was. We're not concerned about the boundary running at the moment. That's not the point. The point is what it's going to be if this goes ahead. And I fail to see how the provision of door supervisors can be now required. It hasn't been required in the past, but it said there won't be any more disturbance. That doesn't make sense to me. I can't see that this development and Seabay apartments are largely businesses, not all. Some of them are holiday homes, which are not let out. The majority are let out. I don't see how the clientele we get will be advantaged by the pub opening, these people coming out at, it'll be between 2 and 3, let's face it. And surely we are best able to judge the impact on our business. It's not a question of the Bowgie's business. I've managed to get onto the letters of support. I've only managed to get onto the ones submitted today. 5 out of 6 live in Crantock, so obviously it's not going to disturb them at all. And a lot of them say, oh, it's not disturbing us at the moment. Well, I agree, it's not disturbing us at the moment. I'm one of the people who go and have a drink there. It's a great pub. That's not the point of the license. The other question we don't know is, and haven't been given the information, the application was actually for every night of the year up to 2 a.m. for what's a much enlarged premises over the Ocean Bar. It's now been dropped down to 50, and it's said that the Ocean Bar did operate on up to 2 a.m. on occasion, but we're not told how often that was in the last few years. That information must be easily available. So I would ask that question. How frequently has this facility been used up to now? And I'd emphasize again that it's not a question of, if this thing isn't going to make any difference, why do it? It's clearly going to make a great deal of difference to have more people with more alcohol aboard leaving regularly late on. And 15 nights a year could be 5 nights a week from Midsummer's Day to the August bank holiday. That would clearly impact on our clientele. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sorry, I'm on the wrong page here.
I use the term Mr. because I'm a surgeon.
Mr. Jones, sorry, yes.
Don't have to call me doctor, even if I was a proper physician. I'm not. I'm only a snot and throttle doctor.
Well, I really appreciate your representation there, and you've asked some very good questions, made some very good comments. So, do members have any questions or comments for Mr. Jones here, please? Right, I don't see any questions coming up. That's absolutely fine, and I don't have any further questions either. So,
thank you for listening.
No, I really thank you so much for dialing in. Sorry, we had some trouble getting you linked in, but really pleased that we did get you in here. So thank you for that. We don't have anybody else on the line. We have tried to get in touch with a couple of the other names that were on the list to speak, but have been unable to get hold of them or to get them on the line here. But we, of course, have their written submissions, their written representations, and those, of course, will form part of the decision that we come to. So we take into consideration all of those, whether or not people have made it onto the virtual call or virtual meeting. We will pay attention to their representations. Right, so...
oh, sorry, could I just add one thing then? I could, I think, reasonably claim to be a representative from CBA Apartments, and obviously I have discussed the matter with Stuart Stratty and Tony, and I'm very much a fourth choice because I thought Geraldine Stratty, who's in fact a psychiatrist, might be better able to answer on the disturbance questions, but I'm able to, as an ENT surgeon, talk about what sorts of noise are disturbing, because it comes into things like tinnitus and so on. Tinnitus is always a quiet noise, even if it's driving people mad, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, that's much appreciated. Thank you. So do members have any further questions, comments, either for Mr. Jones or for anybody else who's in the meeting at this time? Right. I have no other questions from members, so we're going to move to the final submission from the applicant. This is your final right of reply, so I'm assuming we're going back to Mr. Robson for this one, please. You might be on mute.
Chairman, yeah, if he could unmute, yeah.
I should be unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, lovely, thank you, Chair. I'll say an initial bit. I don't know whether Sally and Andy want to jump in based on some of what the objectors have said, but I'll just say my piece initially as to what I've heard on those. In terms of the first one, that does mention public safety, which I think I did sort of touch on in my initial submission. To put, again, a very legal hat on it, as sort of callous as it might seem, the guidance is quite clear that public safety does talk about the sort of safety of customers on the premises. It's not necessarily about the safety of roadway users away from the premises, but saying that, again, the premises has operated, sort of later hours from time to time, and none of those have caused issues in terms of the roads or traffic, which to me is evidence that it would not cause an issue if they continued on having functions to those sort of later hours. Mr. Jones as well mentioned a few points, and again, Sally and Andy, whether they want to address them, I'll leave to them, but just my initial thoughts on some of that is, he did say he had heard music from the premises, but in checking his representation, I can't see that in any way, shape or form within there. So in my view, that's more than an amplification of representation. That's adding something new to it. So I'd ask you to place the appropriate weight on that particular element. And he also mentioned about, he's not seemed to suggest it will become a nightclub. We're just worried about it be like a nightclub. But to me, his representation is quite clear. It seems the long-term plan here is to add a nightclub to the public house and talk about clubbers and such people. So, and even if he says he doesn't think it's going to be a nightclub, a lot of other sort of objectors seem to clearly think it will be, and you had my comments on that earlier. In terms of the closing then, each application must be considered on its own merits. An evidence-based determination that needs to be appropriate for the licensing objectors and their promotion and proportionate to what it's intended to achieve. That's your guidance paragraph 9.43. You've heard me mention about guidance paragraph 9.44 about other conditions already in place, and the track record of the business are also considerations for you today. Again, there are robust conditions on the license and another robust condition put forward as well, limiting it to 50 times a year. So just to stress, currently, whether it's it may be less than 50% the layout. I haven't calculated accurately. It was sort of just looking by sort of my mind eye on the plan, but there's the ocean bar and the public bar side of things. The ocean bar certainly is a large chunk of the premises, and it has a 2 AM license and can do that, say, 365 days a year should it wish. So the new suggested condition would curtail that significantly, and as I said, I think 86-87% curtailment of that. An excellent track record as well held by the premises. Again, there were no claims until Mr. Jones mentioned one there, but that was not in his initial representation. No claims in the objector's representations that when it has used a current late license that this has caused issues, whereas actually there were a number of statements in the support letters and emails of support that they're aware of the late license and it has not caused issues to them. And again, the absence of objections from any of the responsible authorities, especially nothing from the police and nothing from the HO, would ask you to place great weight on those particular facts. Also, the case law Thwaites is particularly pertinent here, and if your legal advisor is very familiar with it and members are very familiar with it, then you can give me the nod and I won't, but in brief, it was a case from many years ago under the Licensing Act 2003, where a premises sought to increase its trading hours. The police objected, but they came to a compromise and they withdrew their objection for a revised application, and there was no objection from the environmental health team either, but there were from local residents, so a fairly similar case you'll appreciate. The applicant wanted extended hours to cater for special occasions, which is exactly what is the case here. So that application was granted by the licensing authority, appealed by residents who won an appeal, and that decision was judicially reviewed. And part of that was the premises under Thwaites' case had actually traded its premises when the application was granted for quite a number of months before the appeal overturned it. And for all of those, the case states there'd been no formal or recorded complaints against the premises under the old or new regime. So again, similarly, the premises had the benefit of later hours, although for a shorter amount of time, and the evidence was that had not caused any particular issue. So again, suggest there's vast similarities with the Thwaites case as here. The premises won on judicial review, and the pertinent paragraph of that is within sort of paragraph 63 of that particular decision. And I think I did supply that previous to this one, but to your licensing officer, I'm not sure if the legal advisor has it. But it states, had they had proper regard to the Act and guidance, they would approach the matter with a greater reluctance to impose regulation and look for real evidence it's required in the circumstances of the case. The fact the police did not oppose the hours sought on this basis should have weighed heavily with them. This is talking about the magistrates. And they proceeded without proper evidence and gave their own views excessive weight, and the resulting decision limited the hours of operation without it having been established it was necessary to do so for the promotion of the licensing objectives, which led to that decision being quashed. So again, it kind of emphasises that case about the absence of real evidence. So fears and speculation is one thing, but real evidence is what is required and what your decision relies on. And again, the importance emphasised of the absence of representations from your responsible authorities as well. So again, the application, if you are minded to grant, we respectfully ask that it is, parties, if they have issues in the future which are not anticipated, we do not think that would be the case, there is the review process, of course, for them to undertake should they wish, them or the responsible authorities. If you choose to grant the application, it would not require you to depart from the guidance, it would not require you to depart from your licensing policy at all, and in my submission and view, it would be appropriate within the framework of the licensing objectives. So the applicant would respectfully invite you to grant the application put forward with that extra condition offered. So that is the closing. Whether Sally and Andy have anything to add, I shall leave to them.
Thank you,
Mr.
Patrick.
Robson. Sorry, so Sally, did you want to say something?
There was just a couple of things that have come up that I wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a question for Mr. Dobson about how many residents at West Pentire there actually are. So I just wanted to say I think it's approximately 60 properties at West Pentire, and 20 of those properties have permanent residents. And I think of those 20 properties, I think 2 have made representation against. So just to put that into perspective. And also just to say about putting it over to back into the licensing authorities to make decisions on when we can host specific events. Just to say that we need the flexibility, and we have already, as I said before, offered to reduce from 365 to 50. And the mention about street lighting or lack of. So just in case everybody is not familiar with the area, West Pentire is actually street lit up until the final house, and then there is grass verge off the road for just pedestrians, and then half a mile away the street lights commence again. So it's a very short little bit of road that isn't street lit, you know, not that access and egress or whatever is critical to our opening times or anything, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about that. And also just to re-emphasize that we are not looking to change the way that we operate the business, you know, in any way, shape or form. And most of what I've heard from Mr. Jones is what could probably or possibly happen. So that was just some things that I just wanted to comment on. Oh, one more thing is he said about the terrace being doubled in size. The terrace has actually just replaced what was previously beer garden. So it's just basically a change of surface underfoot from grass to wooden deck. So just to clarify that as well. And that's it from me.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Sally. I'm going to come to our legal advisor here in just a moment, but I just have a quick question for you, Sally. I'm not sure if I actually heard this. How many times have you made use of the 2 a.m. license in the past few years in the Ocean Bar?
So as I said, we've been refurbishing since November 2018 when we first went for a variation to facilitate the renovations. I would say it probably averages about 50 times a year, hence we've suggested that concession to the application.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. So Mark Andrews, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Mark Andrews from Legal. Yeah, just on the 50 events, can we just, I don't know if it's Mr. Robson can answer this or the applicant, but are you saying 50 events per year, or are you saying 50 occasions when you'll open until a later hour per year? Just if you could just clarify that, because there's been quite a bit of mention of that, and if that's something that members are thinking about attaching as a condition, then I would just like, if you could clarify that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That would...
Sorry, Sally, do you want me to just take this one quickly?
Yeah, sure. So it would be occasions that we have opened later, yeah. So some would be for private events.
It's licensed for activities terminating after midnight would be limited to 50 times. So basically, it's what they could have used the Ocean Bar for formally previously, the 2 a.m. license. So any time after midnight, selling licensed for activities, so whatever, sale of alcohol, recorded music, live music after midnight would be limited to 50 times in any calendar year. Principally, that is because they would have events, which is, I think I referenced events, but not to confuse things. So yes, licensed for activities after midnight, no more than 50 times per year.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Right. Do members have any questions of clarification for Mr. Robson or for Mrs. Pickles at this point? Well, I will take that as a no, unless you're trying to unmute yourself and haven't been able to. Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining the meeting. So what we're going to do now is the subcommittee will retire and obtain legal advice, and of course we'll take into consideration all of the information that we've been presented with today, as well as in the documents pack. And what will happen is we'll take legal advice, we'll discuss it, we'll come up with a proposal. We'll then come back into the live stream. So the live stream will pause while we're in private session, but we'll come back into live stream where we'll discuss the proposal and we'll vote on it, and that will then become the decision of the committee. So we won't be having you rejoin that, so you're welcome to continue to watch the live stream for the response to that, or you can get in touch with our licensing officers and they can tell you the final decision as well. So if I could ask Emma to read out. Yes.
Excuse me, Philip Jones here. Can I just add one thing? If Mr. Robson reads my letter, he will see a reference to being able to hear the music in the past. That is in my objection.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Jones. So if I could have Emma read out our exclusion statement, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's Emma Code, Democratic Officer. Just before I read out the statement, I'd just like to draw anybody who is listening to say that this current live stream link will run till 5 o'clock. So if we don't come back before 5 o'clock and we come back after 5 o'clock, anybody listening will need to use the second live stream link, which is published on the website. So just to clarify that, because obviously when everybody's gone, they won't realise that.
Okay, thanks, Emma.
Okay, so the exclusion paragraph. Resolve that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 5, information in respect of which any claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings, and that proceedings apart from the resolution passed shall remain confidential. Could I ask for a proposer, please?
I'm happy to propose.
Okay, seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Everybody in favour?
Yes.
In favour.
Thank you very much. Could I ask then that officers, the applicant and other persons please leave the meeting?
the live stream has resumed, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rowena. So I'd like to propose that we go back into public session, please.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Yes.
Yes, in favor. We're back in public session. So if I can ask Mark Andrews, our legal advisor here, to read out the proposal, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Mark Andrews from Legal Services. Can you just confirm you can hear me, please?
I can hear you, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Proposals as follows. Arising from consideration of the report, the evidence and submissions from all parties having regard to the statutory guidance, the Council's policy, and the Licensing Act 2003, the application to vary the premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for Bowgie in Crantog be granted subject to the following conditions. The use of premises for licensable activities that terminate after midnight are to be limited to 50 times per calendar year. The premises will deploy SIA door supervisors when open for the sale of alcohol after midnight. Members noted the representations against the application being granted and set out in the report. Members also heard from a number of other persons in support of their representations. Members also noted the representations in support of the application being granted. Dealing with the matters raised in the representations. 1. In respect of the representations relating to the premises being near to residential properties and noise from customers at the premises, including noise from people talking and drinking outside, the subcommittee note the measures agreed to be put in place by the applicant in the applicant's operating schedule, and the subcommittee felt the grant of the application would not have a negative impact on the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. 2. In respect of the representations relating to the potential for crime, drug taking, litter, and general antisocial behaviour, members noted that there were no representations from the responsible authorities in this regard, and that the premises had been permitted to open until a late hour under their existing licence without these issues arising. Further, the subcommittee noted the measures agreed to be put in place by the applicant in the applicant's operating schedule, and the subcommittee felt the grant of the application would not have a negative impact on the prevention of public nuisance or the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objectives in this regard. So just going back there where I said where I said the premises have been permitted to open until a late hour under their existing licence, that reads part of the premises.
Right.
I'll read that paragraph again.
Thank you.
Just for clarity. So 2, in respect of the representations relating to the potential for crime, drug taking, litter and general antisocial behaviour, members note that there were no representations from responsible authorities in this regard, and that part of the premises had been permitted to open until a late hour under their existing licence without these issues arising. Further, the subcommittee note the measures agreed to be put in place by the applicant in the applicant's operating schedule, and subcommittee felt that the grant of the application would not have a negative impact on the prevention of public nuisance or the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objectives in this regard. 3, in respect of the representations relating to problems at the premises in 1970s, 1980s and 1990s, members noted the time that had passed since then and that they're required to deal with each application on its own facts. Members felt there was no evidence these issues would arise as a result of the granting of the application. 4, in respect of the representations relating to traffic, members noted no representations were received from the relevant responsible authorities in this regard and did not feel there was sufficient evidence that the licensing objectives would be undermined on this basis. 5, in respect of the representations relating to planning matters, subcommittee noted that no representations were received from the subcommittee noted that no representations were received from the planning authority and felt that planning was a separate matter which would need to be addressed by the applicant in any event. 6, in respect of the representations relating to wildlife, members noted these concerns but did not feel the granting of the licence would impact on the licensing objectives in relation to this point. 7, taking all the information into account, including the representations from the other persons, members concluded that granting the application would not undermine the licensing objectives and therefore felt that it was reasonable and proportionate to grant the application. 8, members further noted that if issues did arise at the premises, then the premises licence could be subject to a review. That's the proposal, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. So that is the proposal, and I propose that we grant the variation with the conditions as read by our legal counsel just there.
I'm willing to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is everybody in favour, or do we want to do a roll call?
I'm in favour, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sounds like we're all in favour. Emma, unless you want us to do a roll call.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I can confirm in that case that the application is being granted, subject to the conditions read by the legal officer on a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I have no further business, and those are the only two applications we were looking at today. So I just want to say thank you very much to all of our officers and to the members for coming along today. And again, anybody who joined the virtual meeting by phone, thank you so much for coming along. Wish you all the best, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Let's get confirmation when the live stream has finished.
Thanks, Rowena.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark.